Hey everybody, this is section 1 of a piece by Matgamna titled Cliff's State Capitalism in Perspective. The last video from this essay is titled The Great Riddle, Introduction. So this new section is titled The Great Riddle of the 20th Century. And here we go. Winston Churchill famously said of Stalin's USSR that it was a conundrum wrapped up in a paradox inside an enigma. The one-time Yugoslavian Communist Party leader, Anton Siliga, spent many years as a prisoner of Stalin. An English version of part of his book of memoirs was entitled The Russian Enigma in 1940. Its French original was called Au Pays du Grand Mensonge, from the country of the Great Lie. The Great Lie was that the USSR was a socialist society ruled by the working class. That lie was supported by a vast network of subordinate lies, misrepresentations, misunderstandings, and wishful thinking. The essence of the situation was expressed like this by Trotsky in The Revolution Betrayed of 1936. Quote, "The means of production belong to the state, but the state, so to speak, quote, belongs, end quote, to the bureaucracy," end quote. Among anti-Stalinist Marxists, there have been three broad groupings of description and analysis of the USSR with different names: degenerated workers' state, state capitalism, bureaucratic collectivism. Each of the groupings contains many subdivisions. Two of these names are extensions of bourgeois society. The third, bureaucratic collectivism, sees Stalinism as a distinct new socioeconomic formation. These names denote analyses which all claim to be Marxist, all deal with the same phenomenon. They share many elements of description and analysis. That means that discussion and argument between proponents of these categories too easily becomes an incomprehensible, arbitrary bandying of words and names. This inherent tendency to confusion is made worse by the fact that within each of the, quote, big three, end quote, names for the USSR, many often very different and at root incompatible theories have sought a home. Worse still, there is much overlap of substance between some variants of supposedly distinct theories, whose proponents choose to give them different names. In part, this arises out of evolutions within different tendencies of analysis that retain a name it should have shed. Thus, for example, the workers' fight grouping, a forerunner of workers' liberty, which, if you don't know, is the organization associated with Matgamna, had a variant of degenerated and deformed worker state theory, which it saw as rooted in Trotsky's analysis and political attitude to Stalinism, that had, on the level of theory, more in common in most respects, not all, with bureaucratic collectivist and state capitalist theories. Its political conclusions, attitude to Stalinist expansion, for example, as for instance in Afghanistan in 1979, often had more in common with those positions than the position of most workers' status. So, on the level of theory, had Ted Grant's theory of the degenerated Bonapartist workers' state, Tony Cliff's version of state capitalism had so little in common with other state capitalist theories that in its underlying structure had so much in common with bureaucratic collectivism that Hal Draper described its author's name for it as, quote, a matter of terminological taste, end quote. See Workers' Liberty 49. As we will see below, Cliff also shared on the level of theory, if not politics, most of the essential conceptions of post-Trotsky, quote, orthodox, end quote, Trotskyism. Thus, the argument between labels and name tags, degenerated workers' state, state capitalism, bureaucratic collectivism, has become an almost incomprehensible babble. How can it be made sense of, translated into accessible terms? To make sense of it, you must first break the subject of Stalinism down into the elements of the basic questions and issues to which all theories in one way or another jive or imply answers. Where the hell am I? Each, quote, label and the many very different theories, sets of politics that are to be found within each label, is an often arbitrary composite of such elements and answers. The theories are permutations of the answers to the series of questions posed by Stalinism. Trotsky put it like this in 1939/40. Quote, "Let us begin by posing the question of the nature of the Soviet state, not on the abstract sociological plane, but on the plane of concrete political tasks. Let us concede for the moment that the bureaucracy is a new, quote, class, and that the present regime in the USSR is a special system of class exploitation. What new political conclusions follow for us from these definitions? The Fourth International long ago recognized the necessity of overthrowing the bureaucracy by means of a revolutionary uprising of the toilers. Nothing else is proposed or can be proposed by those who proclaim the bureaucracy to be an exploiting class. The goal to be attained by the overthrow of the bureaucracy is the reestablishment of the rule of the Soviets. Nothing different can be proposed or is proposed by the leftist critics. The distribution of productive forces among the various branches of economy, and generally the entire content of the plan, will be drastically changed when this plan is determined by the interest not of the bureaucracy, but of the producers themselves. But inasmuch as the question of overthrowing the parasitic oligarchy still remains linked with that of preserving the nationalized state property, we call the future revolution political. Certain of our critics want, come what may, to call the future revolution social. Let us grant this definition. What does it alter in essence? To those tasks of the revolution which we have enumerated, it adds nothing whatsoever. This approach can be broken down further. Who rules? The working class? The bureaucracy for the working class? A collective state capitalist class? A bureaucratic collectivist class? Can the working class rule socially and economically without ruling politically? That is, without democracy? Is the bureaucracy merely, quote, parasitic, or is it a fully formed new exploiting ruling class? Is there meaning in such a distinction? What is the place of Stalinism in history? A historical blind alley? Is USSR society progressive? Regressive? Is the USSR post-capitalist? Is the USSR in transition to socialism? What are the laws of motion of the USSR economy? Is the working class in the Stalinist totalitarian states a proletariat like that of historical capitalism? If it is state capitalism, what is the working class socialist perspective? If it is bureaucratic collectivism, what is the working class socialist perspective? If it is progressive, what political conclusions follow? Are we for the defense of the USSR by the international working class? Are we for the expansion of the USSR? These are only some of the questions that were embedded in the disputes about names and labels. The whole discussion within the post-Lenin Bolshevik current since the 1920s has been an unstable series of permutations of the varying answers to these questions. Let's examine the elements in Trotsky himself and in those who tried to build on Trotsky's analysis of Stalinism, as did all those in the post-Trotskyist currents, whatever label they used and whatever permutations of the elements they made. But first, some essential preparatory points. Okay, so that's the end of this section. Thanks for listening.